Hi Polyphonic.org. So recently we've been covering a series on auditions, audition technique, audition strategies, how to prepare for auditions, and one of the things that popped up frequently, of course, when talking about preparing for auditions is practicing. So today we're going to do a sort of a spin-off from that audition series and do a series on practicing. We're going to do a two-part practice series on what practice should look like, what you should be getting done, how you should be thinking of practice. So part one, we're going to be covering practice from more of an ideological perspective. What should you be thinking about? What should you be picturing yourself doing while you're practicing? What is practice really? So, number one, practice does not make perfect. You've heard it said since you were maybe 3, 4, 5 years old, however young you were, practice makes perfect. It does not. You also may have heard perfect practice makes perfect, which is a little bit more true, but I prefer something that's a little bit more complete and all-encompassing of all of your practice time, which is practice makes permanent. The things that you do in your practice room will eventually come out on stage or in the audition or wherever you want to sound your best. So, question you should be asking yourself, the first question you should ask yourself about your own practice time is, what do I want to sound like? What am I making permanent today? Is this how I want to sound? More on that later. Number two, there's a physical reason for every single sound that the instrument makes. There's a famous story about a master violinist, Jascha Heifetz, where he's at a concert reception and a patron comes up to him. He's just played brilliantly, and the patron says to him, "Maestro, your violin sounded beautiful today." And Heifetz holds the violin case up to his ear and he says, "Funny, I don't hear anything." The instrument follows our instructions. There's every single sound that the instrument makes is because of something that you do, whether conscious or unconscious. So, if you're going to start asking yourself, well, how do I want to make myself sound better? How do I want to eliminate the squeaks and cracks and just bad stuff in my playing? Well, where is that stuff coming from? Is there something in my bow arm that I could be doing, or something in my embouchure, or something in the way that I just carry myself that's making unintended consequences on the instrument? Start looking not at the instrument, but at yourself. What is it that you're doing to empower the instrument? Okay. Number three, do not watch the clock. If you go into a practice, there's nothing wrong with saying, I want to go practice for an hour. But if that's the only thing that you do, then chances are you're going to be wasting some of that time because you're just filling time. You're just watching the clock. Don't do that. Make yourself a to-do list. Take a look at your music and figure out, okay, so I want to have this done by this amount of period, by this amount of time. Also, as a corollary to this, don't be afraid to take very, very short practice sessions. If you've only got like 15 minutes in between classes, sometimes that can be the best practice time because having such a small window of time can really focus your brain and really focus your practice session because, oh my gosh, I only have like 15 minutes here. I gotta get something done in these 15 minutes. Okay, number four, visualize. This is one of the tougher things to grasp for younger musicians, is that if we want to sound good, if we want to sound good on stage, if we want to sound good in the audition room, in our lessons or whatnot, we have to envision ourselves doing well. We have to start hearing the music before we actually play it. One of the most important things that a young musician can do that I almost never see in my students until I start badgering them about it is listening to the entire piece of music, not just to your part. If you're playing a sonata with your instrument and piano, for example, you should really be listening to the piano part while you play. Because if you're only playing your part, if you're only looking at your piece of the music and you're only envisioning how your part sounds, you're really only envisioning half the music. And of course, if you're in a large ensemble, if you're in an orchestra or a band or a choir, well then the effect just magnifies itself. So, learn the music. Learn it backwards and forwards, visualize yourself doing well. Oftentimes when I'm performing, I'll have a certain 4 or 5 bar segment of what I want a particular part of the music to sound like, and I'll use that to fuel my choice of tempo and the way I dive in and really just get into the music. So, number 5, practice skills. don't practice the music. If you want to play a piece that has a really wild technique in it, let's say that you want to practice something that has just something that's totally outlandish that you've never done before, you wouldn't actually start playing the music, would you? You'd probably start with practicing the technique that's really outlandish, whether it's double stops or playing up super, super high or singing in the passaggio. All those things are things that you would practice outside of the context of the music to make sure that you can do it when you actually get to the music. Well, that shouldn't just apply to our hyper-technical things, but also to our basic technical things. Spend your time practicing scales and arpeggios and just basic stuff that you want to have at the ready on a daily basis. Because if you practice those things on a daily basis, then you get to the music, and the music will just come right out of you just like that, because you've been practicing the skills that you need in order to practice it. It's the same reason why most of you instrumentalists will be able to pick up your instrument and play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star just like that, because the practice of moving your body in just such a way and blowing into the instrument in the perfect way and doing string crossings or register switches or anything like that, all of those things are things that you've just been doing over and over and over again for years and years. So that's something that should apply to all of your technique, not just to the stuff that's super, super hard. Number 6, invest in yourself. This is the most important thing from today's blog, so pay attention. We are, as musicians, when we play with our instruments, a lot of people, this is a really popular misconception, a lot of people feel like our instruments are our lifeblood, that they are the instruments of music making. And it's true for many of us, we couldn't make music without our instruments. But it's important to recognize, as was mentioned earlier, there's nothing the instrument doesn't do that we don't tell it to do. Your first priority, therefore, should be to invest in the real music making fixture, which is you. It's not the instrument. The instrument is an object of music recreation. If you're not creating music from here or wherever it is that you associate your you-ness from coming from inside of yourself, then there's not going to be any music being made from the instrument itself. So, treat yourself well, invest in yourself, and these are the kinds of things that'll really boost your practicing to a different kind of level. That'll really help you, not just in playing the notes, but in playing the music as well. So, that concludes part 1. Next week we will cover the things that really go into a practice session. How do you get stuff done? Until then, stay tuned.